got that straight down. How's your trip? See you next fall. Okay, we got Beverly situated. I'd like to call the planning board meeting of January 16th, 2025 to order. On the agenda, there's instructions if you wanted to join us remotely, guidance on how to join. Please note that the in-person meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technology problems interrupt the remote connection. So I'd like to introduce the planning board members. To my far right is Sean Henry, Beverly Bookin, Doug Cook, our vice chair, Jane Ramsden. I'm Rick Noonan, chair. To my left is our planning director, Greg Kedamatori, and of course, Eric. And next, again, with sort of a solemn moment, our longtime friend and board member Hank McCarl passed, and we'd like to observe a moment of silence for his 23 years of service to the planning board. Okay, thank you, folks. Next on the agenda this evening's A&Rs, site plan reviews, and preliminary subdivision plans. Under this category, we have our first A&R submitted by Patrick Lowe to divide property at 37 Thurston Point Road, Assessor's Map 98, Lot 11. Have any representation on this A&R?
Chairman, hold on, let me make sure I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, board. For the record, John Judd, engineer with Gateway Consultants, representing the applicant for this division of the property noted at 37 Thurston Point Road. This is a property that has frontage on two roads. If you'd like, I can pull it up on my screen and show the layout if that's legible on the screen.
Yep.
Okay, and thank you. So essentially, we have Thurston Point Road on the left, existing dwelling here, and a large backyard here with access on Mako Drive here. So each lot has the requisite area of frontage and so forth and access. And we can answer any questions at this time, should you have any.
Eric, pretty straightforward, this one?
Yes, I believe this is in the R10.
It is, correct.
And it separates, this is the lot division. It's two more or less 10,000 square foot lots with the requisite frontage.
John, could you just explain a little bit more about the traveled way and the layout for Mako? And that's a private way?
It is a private way. The layout as recorded is shown on the two lines here. Obviously, the traveled way here goes back to further homes that exist down toward the south. And what we've done is we've added an easement, access easement here to continue that right of way, or that traveled way rather, that extends across. There's ledge in this area here. I suspect that's why that was never constructed. within the actual right of way. So what we've done is added this permanent easement here that would be recorded with the plan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions from board members?
So that doesn't affect the lot size. It's still a conforming lot, right?
It is, even with the easement, you can see we have over, I believe it's 860 and 960, almost 1,000 square feet of additional area that would still serve the minimum requirement, even if that was not to be used, that easement area, which obviously it is allowed, it's just an easement, an access easement, but nonetheless, it does have the surplus to meet the minimum zoning.
Any other questions? Hearing none.
I move that we approve the A&R plan submitted by Patrick Lowe to divide property at 37 Thurston Point Road. Assessors map 98, lot 11.
So we have a motion by Jane Ramsden, seconded by Doug Cook. And we're all in favor. Everybody's here.
Aye.
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 Very good.
Oh, we don't have to take a single vote.
Oh,
We still have to say aye.
all right, I think you're good, John.
Okay, thank you very much. I will hang around. I'm not sure if, it looks like Mr. Vavaza is on the line, so if there's any questions on the next one, thank you.
Might need a little help. He's already nervous, so stay right there, John. Okay, next on the agenda this evening, approval not required plan submitted by Cherry Street Gloucester LLC to divide property at 147 Cherry Street and 4 Molly's Lane, Assessors Map 188, lots 56 and 57. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Hold on, try this again.
You bring your guitar.
I know this is nice. In one moment, I join as a panelist. While I do that, I will state for the record, my name is Joel Pavaza. I'm an attorney at Seaside Legal Solutions with an address of 123 Main Street.
I have to get a little closer to the mic for us.
I'm just going to hold it.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, you're far, you're clipped in. Okay, it's fine. I'm not going anywhere. Hi, for the record, Joel Pavaza. I'm an attorney at Seaside Legal Solutions, 123 Main Street. Representing the applicant, I'm going to share quickly my screen so we can just discuss. This is 147 Cherry Street and 4 Molly's Lane. And what we have here, if it ever shows up, are 2 lots that exist as separate lots and were otherwise conforming R10 lots. However, there is a structure on the rear of the Cherry Street lot that is too close to the shared property line. And so we believe as a result of that, there's been a merger of the 2 lots to correct that nonconformity. And so in order to address that, rather than tear down an otherwise fine structure, we are going to take land from, you can see on your screen, there's yellow and there's green. I realize on this projector, it's yellow and different yellow. But basically taking land area from Molly's Lane to build out enough space to make the structure in the rear have the appropriate setbacks, and then taking land from the Cherry Street on the northern side and adding that long sliver so that overall the lot area remains over 10,000 square feet on each. The frontage remains sufficient. The Cherry Street property has sufficient frontage on both Cherry Street and Molly's Lane, and the Molly's Lane property continues to have frontage on Molly's Lane. And so it's our submission that this does not require subdivision approval, and we'd ask for a finding from this board that it does not.
Really 10,000 square feet on the button.
John Judd, he had it down to 10,000 square feet exactly.
First time I've seen that.
It's a wonderful time to be alive.
It is. Eric, anything on this one?
I have no information to add.
Fair enough. Questions from board members?
I'm a little confused about why it says parcel B down on the sliver that you're apparently conveying. I guess you're just saying you're conveying parcel B.
Exactly. Parcel B is being chunked out of Four
Right.
Molly's Lane and added to 147 Cherry. And then parcel A, the sliver at the top, is being chunked out of
Right.
147 and given to.
So there's your uneven. 10,000 plus 1,019, 11,019. Yeah, this looks very straightforward, and I like that you're making a non-conforming situation conforming.
Other questions from board members? Hearing none.
I move that we approve the A&R plan submitted by Cherry Street Gloucester LLC to divide property at 147 Cherry Street and 4 Molly's Lane, Assessors Map 188, lots 56 and 57.
Yeah, motion by Jane Ramsden and seconded by Doug Cook. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Have a good night.
John. Okay, next on the agenda this evening is a public hearing in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law 41 and the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land in Gloucester. Gloucester Planning Board to consider a two-lot definitive subdivision plan filed by 20 Main Street LLC entitled Chisholm Court Extension at 20 Main Street, Assessors Map 7 and Lot 94. I'll open the public hearing. And any representation for this one?
So we're in a little bit of a mystery. You'll recall there was a letter submitted to the board back on November 18th of 2024. It was a request from Sean McCormick representing 20 Main Street LLC to continue the hearing to this evening's meeting of January 26th. I reached out to the representative last week. I have not heard anything back further. So there's been no communication since the last continuation request.
You said January 26th. Did you mean 16?
I did mean 16. Thank you very much. Can continue to the next regular meeting and hopefully there'll be some explanation.
Okay, I move that we continue the public hearing for the two-lot definitive subdivision plan filed by 20 Main LLC entitled Chisholm Court Extension at 20 Main Street, Assessors Map 7, Lot 94.
That date?
I believe it's February
Two.
6th.
What?
February 6th.
To February 6th, 2025.
So moved.
We have a motion by Jane Ramsden, seconded by Doug Cook. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, other business. Election of chair and vice chair. Accepting nominations.
I nominate Rick Noonan as chair.
Thank you.
Need a second for that? Yes. Second.
So do we have a motion and a second? All in favor?
Wait, do we have any discussion?
Want to talk about it, Jane?
Anyone need to talk about this? Okay, go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks,
Aye.
Tracy. Thank you. Next is election of vice chair.
I nominate Jane Remsen.
I would second that motion. Let's talk about it, Jane. Any discussion? Hearing none. Just roll call. We don't even need a roll call vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Popcorn for everybody. So we can talk about minutes. We'll see you later. Thanks for coming in. Pull up some minutes. I came up with 17, December 17th first.
I wasn't there for this, but under public hearings, it says pursuant to section 17 of chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020. What is that? What's the Act of 2020? Here, you can look at one.
With the
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, these are old.
Yeah.
That's what we had to identify for the ability for remote meeting. That was back
Oh.
during COVID.
Oh.
So that was the enabling for holding the Zoom meeting. So it was pursuant to that as well as the subdivision control law.
Okay, well, then we should say MGL because
Yep, fair enough.
I
Yep,
assumed it was Gloucester or something.
yep.
Any other comments on the 17th minutes? Yeah,
I'll remember.
I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes of December 17th.
Hang on, I don't think you have a quorum because Doug and I were both not there.
No, oh, you both weren't there.
Yeah.
Uh,
And off.
In keeping with this, are we going to have a new member named to replace?
Yes,
Oh, he's irreplaceable, but
there is a search on the
So
web.
actually, a quorum of the board is 4. And if 3 vote, then that's a majority of the quorum. So you can vote on those minutes.
I like that. Good job. Okay.
Okay,
so we're going to move to approve?
move the to approve the minutes of December 17th.
So move.
We have a
I'll
mo-
second that.
We have a motion by Beverly Bookins. We have a second by Sean Henry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And 1 absent.
And 2 abstentions.
Abstentions. Thank you. All right, that was complicated.
We'll see who was at the next one.
So next meeting minutes are November 21st of 2024. Jane was here, Beverly.
Yeah, I have no comments on these minutes. So unless anyone has comment, I will move to approve the minutes of November 21, 2024.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Fantastic. Here, over here.
Oh, just, yeah, so for a new member, I know the mayor's office has received some interest from some folks. If you have others that you may know of that have some interest, they should express with a letter to the mayor their interest to serve on the board.
So it's in process, but isn't going to be done for a few weeks.
It will probably take a little bit of time, yeah.
It's fine, just so that we
So
know. what is-
the term would have been through February 15th or 14th. So that's, what as obviously we certainly want a full board, so. But that consideration is for the mayor and then through the confirmation process, council.
Great. So discussion of planning board work plan for 2025 is next. Everybody's brimming with excitement.
So,
I understand.
so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Created this. Let me just, there we go. So just to give you a sense of, this is a little bit interactive. It's not, we're not dictating the planning board's agenda, so you can certainly provide new suggestions, but also just being aware of what we have been working on and the milestones of what we anticipate to complete this calendar year. So I kind of just put these in 3 different buckets. Obviously, the comprehensive plan is something that is ongoing and we'll have some activity this month as well as the next couple of months. So over the course of the first half of the winter, is it the first half? I'm not sure where we are in winter. I do enjoy the cold weather. A lot of focus has been on vetting the strategies that you all saw several months back that have gone through technical working groups to vet those further, as well as with some stakeholders to kind of refine them. And you'll see another iteration of those at the meeting, special meeting that's scheduled for the 28th. And again, from that point, they'll then be in the latter part of this month, maybe kicking off the latter part of this month, if not early in February, another community survey related to kind of prioritizing the goals of the plan. We'll also be seeing in February some thematic maps around potential future land use, and that ranges from conservation opportunities to housing opportunities to mixed use and commercial and industrial development. Obviously, looking at our existing zoning as the backbone for that, but also potential recommendations from our consultant team based on goals that have been set in the plan and the strategies that have been suggested as well. And then later in the March timeframe, we'll probably see a full draft of the plan. And then again, there'll be presentation on that before closing out the process. Part of the plan will also be an implementation strategy for who should be responsible for what, which I think could be particularly helpful so that people don't go, who's going to do all this stuff? So that's kind of the rough outline for that. And again, that should close by the late spring, early summer at the latest. And then I just kind of did a little reflective on the last year and what the board might want to work on. We've had a number of different types of permits, some that are not so often used, come before the board that in many instances raised a lot of questions about the ordinance itself rather than necessarily the proposal that was submitted. So whether or not, and you can help prioritize this, but I know we've had a lot of discussion about the interplay between the OSRD ordinance as well as the cluster ordinance. They have differing standards. They have a similar goal in a lot of ways. So kind of doing a little bit of some work on evaluating the merits and standards of the two. And the question has been asked whether we need both. Village Development Overlay District was also one that was a bit of a challenge. You know, making it a little bit clearer around what its intention is and how it can be implemented, as well as, you know, as we saw, this was an ordinance that was created in about 2003, and we saw the first attempt to utilize it last year. Haven't seen as much common driveway and pork chop lot special permit activity as of late. We could certainly summarize, you know, how that's been utilized, when it's been utilized, and whether or not, you know, those are tools that we want to continue to have in the toolbox, as well as the road improvement plan provisions, which seem to always be a challenge. Not every community has that type of process. It seems to me that invariably it causes a lot of angst in the road that's proposing to be improved, and it is a creature of Gloucester's subdivision regulations. Not all communities do it. We actually have had one project that was an A&R application where there was a little bit of a negotiation of improvement that I think is probably going to turn out pretty well. So that's just one, and I would certainly bring Suzanne Egan into that discussion as well, just to think about whether that's something that we need to have on the books, whether we should have on the books. So those are suggestions. If there's others, you know, certainly want to hear feedback. On the environmental regulatory review tab that I've created, so we were anticipating that DEP was going to be changing statewide stormwater standards last year. They held some hearings in the spring and kind of had tabled that But it did cause us to look as we responded and provided some feedback on the draft regulations, that we treat the way that stormwater management needs to be dealt with in a variety of ways and not necessarily in a consistent way. So we have stormwater provisions in our subdivision regulations. We have stormwater provisions in our zoning ordinance. We have stormwater provisions in our wetland ordinance, and as well as there's also some reference to what needs to be applied potentially in a 40B application as well. They have to look towards what we require, and we can't hold somebody to a higher standard than we already have articulated in our zoning ordinance. So I think there's definitely, this is an effort that the engineering department, Public Works, Legal, and Conservation and Planning have been talking about quite a bit. I think we'd really like to move on creating some consistency around that. The way it would impact the board is there may be ordinance changes in the zoning ordinance as it points folks to what standard will be applied, as well as the subdivision regulations. Additionally, in that kind of environmental regulatory review, already referenced a little bit, OSRD and cluster have open space standards, which has an environmental backbone to the application of those standards. And we've also heard a lot about some existing projects as it relates to clear treeing. Jane, you did it to me. My warm seater, my seat warmer. Tree clearing and slope disturbance, and whether or not there's the consideration of some standard related to that. Some communities have tree ordinances that specify how an individual lot has a starting point for being developed. That may be something that's a little bit too heavy-handed, but I just wanted to raise those two potentials as, just feedback from hearings, what we hear and what we've seen in terms of response from a couple of corners in the community where there is no standard for how a lot can proceed. Somebody, if they want to, can basically bring things to bare earth and put it all back together, and whether or not there's any desire to create some preservation of existing trees and whatever that might be, whether it's by size, which isn't necessarily always the greatest thing, because eventually they're all going to age out. But again, it's a consideration that can be infused into subdivision review, into any permit that the board issues, as well as potentially going all the way down to the level of the individual lot. And then the last bucket is housing initiatives. I think one of the things I've certainly discussed with Alex, as we've had all these discussions around housing over the last year, I think we need to do a better regular job of keeping a tab on where we are in terms of not only production, but also a refresher kind of on demographics at a more regular basis, rather than when permit application comes in and we start talking about inclusionary housing, or we're considering an ordinance change that's trying to affect a positive change to develop housing that's been reflective of community need. So that's something we plan to do probably later in the spring. Again, I think we'll also start looking at a 10-year period of what's occurred to give a better baseline. We have some of that information from the comp plan, which will be helpful, and we can kind of reiterate and continue to use that information. I think we're probably at the point where it might make sense. There are new requirements for reporting on accessory dwelling units that are associated with changes that were just recently enacted in August at the state level for ADUs. So we will start to have a better handle on how that's being deployed in the community, as well as it's been delayed slightly, but as the short-term rental ordinance rolls out, there's going to be more of an accounting and understanding of how much what we have in the community for short-term rentals. So I think that will help to inform what's been the impact of being ahead of the state in allowing for ADU by right ordinance, and really, how those, to the extent that we can also understand how are they being rented or how they're being used on an individual property, I think could be helpful. Our inclusionary ordinance comes up quite a bit. We had a fair amount of discussion around that in the 3A effort. And I think, kind of seeing how that's played out in its current form and whether or not there's any adjustment needed. We've had some discussions with the Affordable Housing Trust. They are always kind of looking for ways to generate revenue that they can utilize to help affordable housing projects. And so whether or not, again, this is a question, I'm not dictating anything, but whether or not we could look at the structure of the in lieu payment as it is right now. A 6 to 9 unit would have to make the same contribution, and whether or not there's an opportunity there to look at something that's a little bit more scaled that may also potentially capture more projects contributing. And this is something that was evaluated as a part of the economic feasibility analysis of the 3A. We asked them to look at, because in order to have an in lieu payment or have inclusionary, they had to look at our ordinance and see how it would be applied. We asked them to go a little bit further and evaluate what's the economic feasibility of having something scaled that potentially even lowers the threshold to apply to fewer units than the current ordinance at 6 would require. It was positive in terms of the model that was needed for that economic feasibility. So I think it's a really potential tool that we can use to have a discussion around whether or not that's something that the board would like to consider. And then lastly, we did have discussion about 40R, and I think probably in the late spring, maybe early summer timeframe, I think we'd probably be in a position to start having some discussion about what that would mean, how the tool can potentially be used. But we're also being very sensitive to other activities around housing and introducing that at the right time for discussion. So that's my short list.
So when we're talking about inclusionary and scaling, are you scaling back for smaller requirement?
So I've heard direct feedback from projects in the early stages that the threshold payment for a 6-unit project is too high. And I think what we had discussed during the time of the development of the ordinance was it should be high because we prefer to see the unit built. There was some discussion at the Affordable Housing Trust around this as well. And again, I think that there's a choice to be made there of, is it dollars that can go to a project that has more affordability in it, potentially 100% affordability, like some of the recent developments we've seen, and how that money can assist with moving a project like that forward versus having one unit in a market rate project. So I'm not saying there's any right or wrong answer, but the other thought was, we do treat a 6-unit project and a 9-unit project the same, and there's an economy there of what a project might be able to absorb. Maybe it's easier it should be easier for a 9-unit project to make the same in lieu payment as a 6-unit project. So even in that range, whether there's the potential for a scaling that would make a 6-unit project, again, you're making a choice. If there's a lesser payment for a 6-unit project, it might be more viable to make the payment. But again, how far can those potential dollars go towards being used by the trust to try to leverage a 30-unit project or a 20-unit project versus getting, literally just one unit out of that project. So there's a trade-off there. So we asked them to look at basically taking what we've already had on the books, maybe starting with the 9 and then doing a percentage downward to as low as, in the instance of here, we actually, based on the way the model worked, you could also have a payment for a three-family. Now, that's what the model says. I think there's a lot of cost that goes into that and whether or not that's exactly what you want to do, but at least this model that was tested, that was, you know, potentially used by 177 communities and developed based on all those a pro forma and putting in this as a potential additional cost. It was not something that, according to their threshold of making something financially challenging, could be absorbed. So maybe it's 4 units, maybe it's 5 units, but again, potentially a scale that would potentially generate more funding for the trust, because that's where the funds would go. But it's a consideration. Just after seeing the ordinance in place, we haven't seen it. It's hard to say, you know, are the projects just not multifamily projects coming forward? Is this really the thing that's prohibiting them from happening? I don't know. But there is the possibility, and again, back to that analysis of 10-year period, what have we seen for 3-unit projects, 4-unit projects, 5-unit projects, and what would that mean if we had something in place? I think could be helpful.
That's the only follow-up question would be, has anybody, since we've changed the inclusionary language, made a contribution in lieu payment?
No. So, I mean, at least in that respect, I think, you know, we've seen a couple of projects that have committed to developing within. I don't think we've seen a lot of in that 6 to 9 range. So it may just be that, you know, it's just not the scale of the product that's being proposed at this point. But again, anecdotally, we've heard, and I'd have to kind of verify this with projects at the zoning board level of whether or not there's been 3, 4, or 5-unit projects in that scale. So.
Taking a step back though, for big picture, what of these are, could we prioritize this list a little bit? And also, what can we do ourselves and what do we need? Do we need a consultant for any of this? And which needs funding, which might be hard?
So I think, you know, priority right now is definitely comp plan. That's definitely the nearest term work that will be board interaction this month, next month, March. I think, you know, the second bucket is really a little bit more introspective for board members, your experience from what you've seen over the years, over the last year. I mean, we did have a fair amount of permitting last year as well. So that's an area where your ideas around those, and that can kind of work in a parallel track. We've used either the subcommittee, if you wanted to meet again on specifically around the permits that you issue. The regulatory review piece, I would kind of really more leave, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention watershed protection as well. The latter two around, you know, what is the message from the get-go to the development community if you want to have any requirement in that area. I can certainly, we can create a little bucket in the planning board folder of models from other communities for you to consider and read about. You know, like tree clearing one is definitely a number of communities have adopted those. The kind of umbrella of stormwater subdivision watershed protection, I think we will use some consulting support for that and work with, we may have the funding to do it, or potentially cobble funding together with the engineering department to try to move on that. Because a lot of it does directly relate to, we want to make sure that we're not holding a private development to a different standard that we hold public development to. And there's also just been a number of things that are common practice for utility installation, for instance, that we continue to ask people to ask waivers for. You know, and you want to feel letter of the law, there should be a public good for why you're, granting a waiver. And I mean, if we're just going to have the same, same reasoning of, well, that's what Public Works does. I mean, we should just kind of correct that, make sure that, and also kind of hold to, if you're going to reset the standard and have that exercise and say, this is what we think you should be doing, then you'll have fewer waiver requests as well. And somebody says, well, actually, we'd like to, no, this is the standard, and there's no public interest to waiver from this. So I think some utility design work, but also, taking a look at, one of the things that's come up in a number of subdivisions has been street trees and sidewalk on both sides, and, different things like that, that I think there'll be a point where there'll be a technical piece of this that will be recommendation from consultant that will probably be using a consultant that often consults with the city on utility project and that type of thing. But when it gets into what do you want submitted to you? Do you want, I mean, there's been a couple of times where we've had to ask for, you're supposed to locate the trees. Why aren't you locating the tree? So making that stronger on the front end, and then again, back to if there's going to be any standard for looking at alternative layout or preserving different elements of a project before you just get, here's the plan. And again, that also can go, it has an impact as well if it happens at the lot level. Then you really will be focused on street layout and street design, which is really what the subdivision control law was around. And we kind of get wrapped into this holistic plan. But it may be that there's other ways to ensure that there's going to be some preservation if it was done at the lot level as well. So clearing out 100 feet, and then putting everything back together again, or you clear the roadway, the limit of the roadway, maybe 10 feet either side, you develop that infrastructure, and then the lot standards can be applied at a different point. But just in general, I think that's the type of thing that from individual board members, a little bit of reflection. We have our plan sets that are all available through the Google Drive, thinking back to the things and issues that you've heard about, you've heard from the public, or you yourself was thinking, geez, I wish there's something we could have done about that. That's where I think it would be helpful. And again, the housing initiative stuff, I think we'll bring to you, but just what I've talked about so far, just, how that's potentially piqued interest, or, picking, what, if we were going to look at one thing out of these, I would like to look at this first, or, that type of thing. And you don't have to give me your answer tonight either, but I just wanted to kind of put this out there.
Are consultants needed to update the data? Or we can do that?
So
housing.
I think we will probably have some support for that, but I'm
By
also,
we, I mean you, actually.
we will have some consultant support for that.
You already do.
We will likely have consultant support for that. I also think we're going to do, like the ADU information has to be compiled. So that's something that we're going to draw from our own existing data. Yeah. So I think we'll have some support for that effort as well. It's not just going to be done within house.
But it's not hard to get a consultant, is what I'm hearing you say. It's not.
I think for what we need consultant support, I think we'll be okay,
Okay.
for what we have, unless there's another idea or, yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is comp plan is kind of on autopilot now. So nothing really to worry about there. Maybe the subcommittee could meet on the second bucket. And then the stormwater and this subdivision regs in the watershed, that's kind of urgent, right? That's a little bit more urgent.
I think it's something that we're scoping right now with engineering, and we will be bringing
Yeah.
recommendations to you.
Okay, great. And then tree clearing, I definitely think we ought to do that. That's always showing up as something that we wish we could fix. And then updating the data, including the impacts of the ADUs and the short-term rentals. Yeah, we should get going on that too. But I mean, I'd like to get going on the inclusionary thing, but that can also wait. So it doesn't come up all that often, does it?
I mean,
Okay,
we-
nothing
we
can
don't,
wait.
I mean, it's purely a timing. I mean, we can share
Yeah.
it. I think we've shared that information with you. We'll certainly share that. So I'll try to now take this and put it kind of into buckets of information with background information for each one of them. So I think like you said, the second bucket is probably the one that's kind of, it's totally in your control for your consideration to, you know, even kind of, if you were to think about those 5 different areas and which one you want to take up first. It's just things that I think the themes that we've seen over the years and last year in particular with, you know, at least the first 3, you know, kind of all kind of coalesced and had issues and concerns around language and how it's applied and all that kind of stuff. That, you know, that can be kind of decided maybe at a subcommittee meeting or something like that.
You guys think?
I would agree with that. And at those, you know, like the cluster stuff, that's always I don't think anybody really understands what a cluster development is, what the, you know, what you're kind of going for. It's like, let's group those houses together and paint them yellow, and let's group those houses together and paint them green, right? They don't get the understanding that it's supposed to be about preserving the land primarily, which goes with this tree clearing kind of piece of that. So, I mean, I see that consistently.
But I think the thing is, and, you know, certainly in the cluster context, you know, 20 years ago, the idea is that we want to preserve the land, right? And so we're going to give you density credit effectively to get your unit count to where it is. And then the only thing that we heard during Kerrigan's project is like, how can you put these houses so close together? Right? And so there was no consideration, there was no benefit in the public's eye, in my opinion, that we're saving 70% of this for conservation, deed restricted. But the people were so focused on the clustering of those units, they thought it was outrageous. Right? I mean, so again, and in the language, certainly in village development, same thing, right? I mean, it was gamed to a certain degree where the density credits weren't really being used, right? I mean, we were sort of threatened with 52 units, but I'm only building 36. But the whole reason I'm using this, you know, subdivision control law was that it had that provision, that it's a permit from the planning board, not the city council. Right? So all these things that never really be considered. I mean, so I would be, you know, of the opinion that take a quick look at it and say, do we keep it on the books or not? Right? And not go through a lengthy, painful process of trying to fix something that's 20 years old that's never been used and say in or out, up or down. Right? I mean, that would be the way I would approach that.
Definitely the village one, that's for sure, that one, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's like a no-brainer.
But OSRD and cluster overlapping
The
and
OSRD.
contradictory, so we need to pick one or
Yeah.
to pick the best of both or something. Any other comments over there? All right, well, next steps then?
Well, we have a couple meetings coming up, but I think if you wanted to just kind of take off of maybe what you were just referring to, those kind of 3, maybe at a subcommittee meeting in February, March timeframe. I mean, totally. I mean, again, there's nothing that's pushing this. It's also just the cadence of, you know, what we're going to see on the every 2-week schedule. But also, you know, the next month is a little intensive with a couple extra meetings. But if you think it makes sense to move that off to refer that to the subcommittee level, we can have a discussion and then kind of go from there. And maybe we can break that into, you know, those 3 as well as the consideration of tree bylaws and that kind of, or I say bylaw because I just know of a town that has one. So we can kind of break that into 2 parts and then make some decisions how you want to move forward with it.
The MBTA business notwithstanding, and with the upcoming referendum in April, I think we have a shared concern about keeping the eye on the ball about creating housing alternatives, especially those that are outside of the MBTA and don't have the baggage that it has. And I hope we don't lose sight of that, because we did come up with at least 3 or 4 opportunities for increasing housing through creative zoning that did not need to be in the MBTA, and I don't want to lose sight of those in this coming year. It certainly would be a big win if we could come up with, as part of our planning rather than our regulatory, come up with some ideas that might have some resonance in the community about that.
I agree. And 40R, I don't know where the list went, but that was on at the bottom of the list. But I think it's just with everything else going on, probably take it up in the summer or the late spring.
And I think it's not really an issue for the planning board, although it would, I think, assist us in explaining to the public why we're doing things, is to develop a public-facing data set of projects that have occurred and are in process. Because again, I think a lot of pushback to some of the zoning changes that we promoted during the ordinances, the amendments we pushed forward, and heard it with under 3A work as well, is that we have all this development going on already. And I've seen repeatedly, mainly one person, but it's spread, that we built 1,000 new units in the last year, or last few years. And I know that not to be true, but most people don't. And I think we don't have a system that some other communities have that show sort of a year by year what's happened, what's been created and or permitted to be built. I think Woburn has that on their website. Wakefield has some information like that on their website. So I think that could be, again, it's not planning board specific, but I think it would alleviate a lot of the angst against various zoning proposals that we come up with if there was a publicly available data set that we could point people to and say, no, we didn't build 400 houses last year. There were 12. So.
Yeah, and I think that's what I have in that, I had in that last bucket, that 10-year. So we actually did the exercise for obtaining the housing choice designation. And it was a 5-year look, and it's not easy to compile that data, just because of the way that we had shifted from one permitting software to another, and then everything kind of prior to that point was still paper file. So we definitely are in a better position now that we have the software package is called View Permit. It can be queried. It's also got to make sure that you have the right fields that are in there so that you can classify things. That's one of the things that was not put in place when the ADU ordinance went in. It was work on a single family lot. It wasn't really tagged to be, okay, this is a new ADU. So we're working on making sure that going forward, when somebody does file a permit for that, it's very easy to be recalled. So I think that's something, I think it's a good point that I think would be helpful for people to understand. And I think I spoke to it probably during those discussions about, on average, we're generally around 40 to 50 single family homes a year, and then even fewer of other types of projects. But yeah, getting that understanding of what our growth looks like, it will be helpful for any discussion.
I think there's some context too, since we did our comp plan, let's use it. And that's something I've talked about, is that the data shows that we have similar population to 20 years ago, but the characteristics of our population is changing. Our household sizes are smaller. Our population is aging. We have fewer children per unit. And that needs to be reflected in filling the gap for new housing, that our distribution of housing types don't quite match our population as it is. Now, we don't have to make a big deal about it, but I think our website for the city should talk about, the characteristics of our population and the challenges we have to meet needs for, changing demographics as a context for then saying, this is why we're looking at these kinds of housing initiatives, these kinds of zoning initiatives. It's because we understand that the characteristics of our community are changing.
So to me, that sounds like an updated housing production plan, right? So,
Okay.
right,
Yeah,
I mean, so
yeah,
it's
I think
5 years
that-
old.
It's longer than that.
Yeah.
So that is,
Absolutely.
Right, and so I think that, right, yeah. So I think the thing that, was a standout for me in that production plan was that then, we were forecasted in a 5-year period to be short 750 units, right? And we were still working with that 40 or 50 units per year kind of a thing. So let's just keep the math easy, right? So, 50 units over, to get to 750, it's a 7 or 8 year build out, right? And then, so now we're past that threshold, and has that even happened, right, on average, right? And so I think, again, to add, another stepping stone, I hate just putting plans on the shelf, but the point is that that information led to, other initiatives, and to revisit that, at least that, methodology, and again, it's an aging population, it's downsizing from Nana's house into a 1,200 square foot apartment and all those other things. Has that trend actually come to be true, or has it changed, right? As younger people moved out, as Nana sold their house, and et cetera, right? So I think that's good on the bucket.
What do you think, Greg? Do you think it's time to update the housing production plan?
this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the data need for that is one of the real values of it. I think really understanding, we continually have these snapshot points, and I think we have a lot of good data in the existing conditions from the comp plan as well. That's not stale yet. But it certainly would be interesting to see the comparative of where we were in 2017 and to current. And as I mentioned, the data collection that we had to do for the housing choice designation was looking at 5-year period, and the metric that gets you there is whether or not you've increased your housing stock by 3 or 5% in that 5-year period. We just surpassed the 3%. But you have to remember why we did that, because we had in the mix the Halyard project, which, was a significant influx. We actually would have been closer to the 5%. The Middle Street project, the Y Middle Street project, actually wasn't online yet. They had not pulled the building permit, and they were just looking at building permits pulled. It wasn't occupancy permits. So that gives you, that's something that's valuable in the discussion, to kind of look at that time period and how many units were created, and look at that again. What's our true growth rate looking like? Yeah. So I do. There's no requirement to have a housing production plan. The reason that we did it at the time, collectively, I think we all said, this isn't just about affordable housing, it's about, community housing need, which is across the board. There's no type that I don't think that somebody has a need for at this point. Maybe understanding a little bit more of what's the most, dominant need, which, then you can look and see and say, well, how can we try to promote that particular type of housing? But I think, I think it's valuable mostly for the education piece of it, of where we are in that moment, and understanding, demand a little bit more as well. So, yeah.
when we comply with 3A, it will be a nice starting point. Those who didn't. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, the only other thing that I need to do is find somebody on the board that would like to be the adjourn person. Hank is no longer the adjourn guy.
There's no baseball game on, but we should go.
Yeah. Well, there's
But
a-
nobody qualifies.
You know, Hank brought me onto the planning board because I met him at the radio, whatever, amateur radio. Yeah, because we were, you know, as one does, wondering what to do in a zombie apocalypse in case we had no communication. So we went to check out the radio, amateur radio place, and there was Hank. And I thought I was going to be there 5 minutes, and I was there an hour, also, as one does with Hank. But and then he brought me onto the planning board. Good guy. I don't want to be, I can't fill his adjourn shoes, so someone else is going to have to do that.
We could, in honor of him, do a rotating so that no one takes his place. So in that spirit, why don't I start it, but I won't do it next meeting, which is I move to adjourn.
Motion.
Good.
We have a motion by Beverly Bookins, seconded by Jane Ramsden. All in favor?
Aye.
I
Aye.